Get some measures around transparency and accountability on what they're trying to do with this ministerial power overreach, then I'm optimistic that we can find a path forward.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Justice Minister Sean Fraser says when it comes to Bill C-9, Liberals are looking for movement, not necessarily for support.
We would love to have their support, but at minimum, we want them to stop their obstruction. If they choose to filibuster the Justice Committee for months again to delay the work that we're doing, not just on hate, but also on gender-based violence and exploiting kids, it would only be Canadians.
So Conservatives have been holding up legislation in committee over concerns they have and share with religious groups that the bill could criminalize some religious texts and worship. But with the recent cooperative attitude from the Conservatives, well, what progress can be made, and could this collaboration ultimately avoid a spring election? We've got Opposition House Leader Andrew Scheer here with me now in the studio. Mr. Scheer, good to see you again. I mean, what is your reaction to what Sean Fraser had to say? Because when the Justice Committee meeting got cancelled yesterday, it was billed as a sign of progress. Where are things? Well,
it's just a completely false characterization for Sean Fraser to say that. It's Liberals who have chosen to prioritize a bill that is divisive, that has divided Canadians and divided parliamentarians as well. We proposed 19 times in the fall to park C-9 so that we could deal with bail reform. That's something that Canadians feel very strongly about. We don't believe the government's solution to bail reform goes far enough, but we said, well, at least it doesn't do any further harm. Let's pass that very quickly. It's the government that chose to keep C-9. The same is true with their other crime legislation. It's Liberals who are choosing to use C-9 as an obstruction measure against their own legislation. My understanding, though, from what I heard yesterday, was that maybe this had gone to negotiations, perhaps with the House leaders, the Justice Minister or his proxies, and the critics on this portfolio, and that maybe some progress was being made, and the Bloc would have been in on this too, because you're kind of on opposite sides with them a bit on this. Is that in fact the case? Are you moving towards something that can go to committee maybe as soon as tomorrow? Well, it's already at committee, but maybe what I would say is that we are engaged in good faith conversations about what aspects of C-9 are supportable. Protecting access to places of worship of all faiths, protecting sites that are connected to faith-based groups, wide support for that. We don't believe anybody should be harassed or intimidated on their way to a temple, a synagogue, a mosque, or a church. So if there's areas where all the parties agree on and there's more contentious issues that are blocking that, maybe we should focus on the common ground and get that passed quickly.
So you're talking about splitting the bill, and I appreciate, yes, it's at committee. I meant a compromise that could go to committee by tomorrow. Are we close to that, or are you insisting on the contentious bits being taken out and put into maybe a separate piece of legislation?
Well, at the risk of compromising good faith conversations, what I would say is that we made our position very clear. There are elements of the bill that are not offensive to most Canadians. There are elements of the bill that do not empower government to censor religious texts or religious speech. If the government has a willingness to work on that common ground, we would take that in good faith.
But are we close to seeing something on this by tomorrow? Because I appreciate the contentious issues. I mean, you have argued that this will criminalize certain religious scriptures and texts. The Bloc believes that the religious exemption is being used as a shield against hate speech, and there's some challenges in reconciling those. Do you think we will see some kind of a compromise put to committee tomorrow, or is it too soon to know? Well,
first I would say it's not just Conservatives saying that. The Liberal minister himself admitted that this would criminalize aspects of those faith-based texts. And there are existing laws.
When did he admit?
He came to committee and he said absolutely that. Mark Miller said that.
Parts of the Bible would be criminal, because Mark Miller is saying on social media that is not in fact the case.
I can show you the clip where he was at committee and he said absolutely that would be captured. Those are his words. I mean, I believe that was pretty well disseminated when he said it. And what I would say is there's lots of laws existing on the books right now that aren't being used by the government to prosecute hate speech, and the massive rise in things like anti-Semitism that we've seen, where streets are taken over for days and days at a time in some cases, and bricks thrown through daycares, in fact, shot up. There are lots of laws existing on the books that are not being used that could go into that. We don't believe that the answer is to add new laws that if I take the Mark Miller's own words, the intention would be to make some passages of religious texts illegal. Now, what I will say in terms of timelines, it's hard for me to assess the pace of that, but I will say that we've been, that we have been having good faith conversations to see if there's a way to prevent the Liberals from using C-9 to block other pieces of legislation that we would say, hey, if this improves the judicial system, let's look for results.
Okay, so on the Budget Implementation Act, because this is going to be a big one, not that this one isn't serious, but this is unquestionably a confidence motion and needs to get passed before the end of March, I believe. Kate, who was just in the studio, had some reporting that there is a conversation happening between the Conservatives and the Liberals after the meeting with Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Kearney to maybe strip out some components of the Budget Implementation Act, including the bit to give ministers the power to exempt certain companies from certain non-criminal pieces of legislation if it helps with economic competitiveness. This is an issue that you don't support as a party. Where are things on that? Are you willing to compromise on the Budget Implementation Act if the government, in fact, accedes to this request? Where are things?
Well,
Just a reminder, gang, smash the like, hit subscribe. We work really hard at this stuff. Let's get back to the video.
I would say is that that particular clause that you're talking about, it's referred to as the Henry VIII clause for a reason. It gives the government massive amounts of power, and it's virtually unprecedented. And what the Liberals are trying to do is give ministers the ability to circumvent several laws that no one else gets that kind of power to do. So what we've said is if they accept our compromises, and if we say to them, look, let's build some scrutiny around that, some transparency. Let's make sure that Liberals don't get to do what they've always done. When Liberals believe that no one's looking, what do? They have the Green Slush Fund scandal where they line the pockets of wealthy, well-connected Liberal insiders. There are all kinds of examples of Liberals using tools to enrich their friends. We want to make sure that can't happen. So if they agree with us that they will modify or build better protections around that particular clause, then what we've said is that we would allow for a path for the budget bill to pass.
Okay, so through the House of Commons, not just through committee, but through the House of Commons entirely.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to prejudge outcomes of conversations.
No, but that's the offer.
But that is the sticking point. We believe that it's our job as the official opposition to hold up a light, to scrutinize, and to propose solutions. We believe that they have tried for a massive overreach here. I mean, think about ministers just having the ability to circumvent duly passed legislation, regulations, all kinds of power. I don't believe Canadians want that. When you allow for a government to create an economy where the only companies, businesses, workers who get to succeed are those people who have special access to ministers, that creates terrible outcomes for everybody. We need to move quickly after 10 years of terrible Liberal policies that drove up costs and chased away investment, but we can't do it in a way where governments get incredible power without scrutiny. Every time that's been tried in every country that's been tried, it leads to corruption and terrible economic outcomes.
But you talk about the Liberal policies driving up costs. Your central thesis has been that deficits have been a big factor in driving up the costs. This Budget Implementation Act would allow for an $80 billion plus deficit, depending on where things go. I mean, how comfortable are you letting that go through? Because that's what the end result would be. Even if you do get this change, and I appreciate the points you've outlined on that, it is an $80 billion deficit budget that the Conservatives will be compromising on allowing it to go ahead.
Yeah, well, not to get too procedurally wonky, David, although maybe your viewers would appreciate
Give it a shot.
Deep dive into this. But the spending in budgets happen when the budget implementation, when the budget vote itself happens. There's a Ways and Means motion that happened back in November.
Fair point.
So that's already locked in. This is legislative changes, some of which Conservatives have long been calling for. Some of which we don't agree with. You know, they're putting billions of dollars more into the Canada Infrastructure Bank. That's something that hasn't delivered results. But that's already, again, that's spending that's already been locked in. So if we can get some measures around transparency and accountability on what they're trying to do with this ministerial power overreach, then I'm optimistic that we can find a path forward.
Is this level of cooperation that you're offering, because it was very different before the break, for whatever reasons, is it just to avoid an election? The public opinion polling would suggest that they are ahead by a small amount or a large amount. The gap on leadership is quite large if you look at favorability ratings and all these sorts of things. And a lot of the analysis and even talk from people in your caucus is, we don't want an election, we're worried about an election, so let's not give them an excuse to call an election by being obstructionists in Parliament. And this is more self-defense and avoiding self-harm than it is cooperation.
Well, first of all, we make decisions based on principle, not politics. And secondly, I would say I don't agree with the characterization. If you look at since the election, we signaled right up front. We said, look, after 10 years of Liberal policies, carbon taxes, inflationary deficits, soft on crime policies that have drastically made our country less safe and more dependent on the U.S. economy. We need to get to the results phase. In the spring, we passed Bill C-5. That's what Mark Carney claimed that would allow him to build all kinds of new major projects. They haven't been able to get a single new project through that office, but we facilitated the passage of that bill. In the fall, we tried 19 times to park C-9 to deal with bail reform. Liberals only agreed on the 20th time. So if you look back at the last few months, we are consistently saying where a Liberal bill does no further harm, where they steal one of our ideas, or where Mark Carney is claiming that this will get the results that Canadians expect, we're saying, okay, well, we will let that pass, and Canadians can judge him on the results.
So it's not about a spring election at all? You're not about worried about an election in a little bit?
We were working in good faith on legislation since the last election, and it's been very consistent with what my leader, Pierre Poilievre, said to the Prime Minister right after the election. It's consistent with the letter that he wrote the Prime Minister when the House of Commons returned. We've identified areas where, with a few, if they accept a few compromises to build in better protections for taxpayers and more protection on transparency and accountability, then we would allow for a path for that legislation to pass. So we've been very consistent since the last election on this.
One last question. One of your new MPs, Mike Dawson from New Brunswick, released a letter today saying, don't give us the 10% raise that we're due through statutory pay increases as MPs. He says with Canadians suffering, shouldn't do it. Is that the position of the Conservative caucus, or is Mr. Dawson out on his own on that one?
Well, the reality is that kind of thing is set in legislation. It would take government legislation to make any changes on that. Every member of Parliament is free to do with their salary what they will. I know in the past many members have donated pay increases to charity, but that's so if it's not something that really any one MP can opt in or opt out of. It's done through legislation.
Right, but this is Mike Dawson's position. This is not a shared view of the caucus, something you would propose. This is him saying it on his own. I'm just trying to quantify the level of support for this inside the Conservative caucus.
It's up to each individual MP of all parties to decide what they do with any adjustments in pay. And as I mentioned, this is government legislation. It's been locked in. It's a previous Liberal government that set up this regime, and it would take a government decision to make any changes. So you'll have to ask the other House Leader about that kind of thing.
All right, Opposition House Leader Andrew Scheer. We appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in, sir.
Thanks very much.
Canadian federal politics are absurd. We're going to stick a fork in that video. It's over. My name's Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. Smash the like, hit subscribe. Please leave a comment below if you have something to share. Enjoy this playlist. Check out this video. We've got lots of things to watch. Aaron, Canadian Looney. We'll catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching this one. Ciao for now.